Okay, so we got another DNA 200 build to do today, and this one's going to be a little bit different. The last one was based on a Lipo battery, which some people don't prefer, I'll put it that way. So instead today I'm going to build DNA 200 in a 1590B box with a Dual-18650 sled. I should note that using two 18650s you are limited to 133 watts, but for me personally I think that's more than enough for myself. So the big difference between this kit and the Lipo kit is the addition of these two parts. This is a balance charger plug with leads coming off of it and the Dual-18650 sled. So if you watched the other video, the rest of this will be pretty familiar. It's going to be very much the same build, but we'll get to that in just a second. So Velcro 510 connector. The shelf pins are standard, but I have actually a plethora of new buttons to offer, and I'm going to be introducing one of those in this video. So we got the 3 brass standoffs for mounting the board to the box, the grub screw and magnet combo for holding the lid on, 3 small screws for mounting it, and of course I forgot these 3 small black screws for the outside of the box, the balance charger, I guess, outlet that goes on the board, the XT60 connector for the battery, and let's see here, we got some double stick tape. I upgraded the double stick tape in recently. This stuff is ridiculously strong, so there shouldn't be any issue with sticking the screen down. Kit also comes with 6 inches of some gauged wire for you, silicone coated, and I'm throwing in this extra little bit for doing some buttons. We got some heat shrink tubing, and the important bit, I suppose, the most expensive bit, will be the DNA 200 board itself. And the screen, I'm not going to take that out just yet. For this build today, I'm going to swap out some of these parts, actually quite a few of them. So for the box, I'm going to use what I affectionately call the Night Zombie box, and that is a zombie green splattered over a matte black 1590B box. Should note that the 1590B is going to be probably the smallest box that you could use for this, because the 18650 sled has to go in here along with the board and everything else. If you want to buy a separate box, I believe you could probably squeeze it into a 1550p, I want to say. I'll double check that later. But yeah, that would be really squeezing it in. This will not fit in a 1590G box though. So let's see, what else do we got. Instead of the shelf pins, I'm going to show how to wire up a fire button. And this is one of the new fire buttons I have got. This is 16 millimeters, so it's slightly larger than the buttons I've previously carried. And this is kind of a flush mount trigger type. I really like this button actually, because it doesn't go inside the body of the button, which I find a little bit more comfortable. And I'm also going to use the little dome tactile switches that are clicky. So those will be the up-down buttons. And for the magnets, I'm going to do the black epoxy magnets, because we got a matte black box and I think they just look better. So we got that. And the 510 connector, I'm going to swap out for one of the powder coated 510 connectors, and that's going to be matte black. So that's what I'm going to be putting together today. I think a lot of this build is going to be the same. But I'm going to go through it all anyway. And the only real difference is going to be how we get the sled wired up, and then I'll go through at the end of the video on how to use the eScribe software to change the settings on the board itself to accept 2 cells instead of 3. So there we go. Okay, let's do the tool talk real quick. Gonna need a small assortment of bits for this one. The 1/4 inch bit is for doing the holes in the lid for the magnets. The 13/64, which is an odd size, and I had to buy this separate of my regular bit kit, but this one is for the tactile switches, and it fits them perfectly. They will friction fit, but a little glue is a good idea too. An 1/8 inch or a small bit. 1/8 inch works great for me for doing just tapping out the screen area and the USB port area. The camera can pick that up good. I just tap some holes in the corner and then cut it with a Dremel. This is just a cutting disc. This is a very worn down cutting disc. Normally they're much bigger than this. And then the little tiny screw mounting holes is going to be 5/64. That is the very small holes for the brass standoff bits. I like to use, I just use it by hand actually, but this countersinking bit, just to do a couple quick turns to sink the outside screws in just a little bit so they don't stick up. For finishing off the screen area, just a couple of these cheap keyhole files. I think these are wood files, but after we get it all cut out, just to clean up the edges a little bit. Obviously a Dremel, very helpful, and a hand drill for sure. A drill press is nice to have for doing the lid holes, but everything else I use hand drill, along with my new and improved vise here. I added on these HDPE high density plastic thingies to make the jaws of my vise that much nicer on the boxes that clamp down. So if you haven't watched the other videos, this vise is bolted down to a 3/4 inch piece of MDF, and I just kind of sunk the bolts from the bottom of it. Works great. Cleanup's real easy. You can take the vise off and vacuum under it or whatever, but highly recommend this if you're going to get into box modding and making box mods, because you can just swap these boards out. This is just a 2x2 piece, and I swap it out with my soldering station one that I bring in here, and it works great. So that's tools, and as always, safety glasses. Don't really want to lose an eye over this stuff. So let's get on to drilling out the box. Alright, mandatory drilling diagram talk now. Sorry, this is a little faded because my laser printer is going to crap apparently, but just to go over the basics. When you print this out, don't print it out in your browser. Your browser likes to add all sorts of funky margins and stuff. So when you print it out, make sure you double check the scale in the top right corner here. Both of those lines should be 1 inch square. Make sure you get that right, and then it should all line up together. So what to talk about on this? Cutting these out, it is important to cut outside the lines. The lines are included in the dimensions, and just get everything to line up real nice. It's important to cut outside of them. So some tricks I've added to this. Something I always forget to mention in the tool portion is the little finger breaker hammer I got here and the punch. I always forget to add those in the tools, and the other thing would be a glue stick. Just Elmer's, child safe glue stick. Washes off the powder coat real easy, so you don't have to worry about damaging or anything, but make sure these get stuck down real nice. So here is the figure for the 16mm button I plan on using. And something to note about these, yeah, I'll do that now, I guess. Alright, so these dashed lines at the very ends here are kind of important because they show you how to line it up on the box. With the rounded corners, trying to match it up at the ends doesn't work great. So line those up with the screw posts on the inside of the box, and they should fit right in between that. And then just flush to the side. One thing you might also notice is the center line here is offset slightly, and that is intentional. This skinnier side is supposed to go to the edge of the box here, and that is to account for the thickness of the lid. So when you slap that on there and you get these lined up, that is the center of the entire height of the box. So keep that in mind. For this one, I think I'm going to do a center drill pattern since we have the larger box, and I'm only going to be putting 18650s in this. I was thinking about making it swappable, and you very well could do that yourself if you wanted to. So you could swap between a Lipo and the two 18650s, which I think would be kind of a cool feature. The only thing I'd have to keep in mind is you're going to have to go into the eScribe software, I believe, and change the settings on the board between swaps. So it's not like something you could do while you're out and about. Although I don't know anybody who carries Lipo batteries around with them like that. So something to keep in mind. Alright, so the box here. For these splatter boxes, I've noticed they're usually blank on the bottom, but I guess my guy did it differently this time. But looks like it's going to sit just fine like that. So I'm going to make the top this area, and that should look pretty good with the powder coated 510 connector I got here. So that'll be right in the middle. So that's going to be the top, I guess. So for the glue stick, you just want a thin layer and just kind of smear it over. I've gotten the best results before when I actually let these things tack up a little bit and then let the template sit on there before going right to drilling. So I'm going to probably cut the video and let that happen. So we got that on there, and then for the 510 connector, since it's only just one hole, I'm just going to hold this on here and punch it with a hammer. Get a good mark. And that will show us where to drill the 510 connector, which is right. Really don't want to gouge this too much, but could get lost in the pattern there. So that's that. And the other trick with these, I want to make sure this gets lined up right. Grab some clear packing tape. You can use Scotch tape if that's all you got, but and then this will strengthen the paper. I want to get, let's see here. So I'm going to cover up the screen first, since there's more to do on this. Same trick I use in all the voltmeter videos and everything else. So let's see here. I'll just layer that over that area and smooth that down. So it gives it a nice protected edge, as it were, and then I'll punch the button here. And I did intentionally do that a little off center. I just want to make sure there's enough metal on the side there. So let's see here. Alright, first up I'm going to do the 510 connector because that's nice and easy. thrown that away. So 510 connector, I use a 7/16 hole with the, I forgot to mention this in the tool, but tool section, but it was sitting there. This is a step drill bit. Works great for doing these big holes. You don't need a giant drill bit that can get out of control easy. And it chews right through these Hammond boxes, which is kind of nice. So let's get this plugged in. So as I was saying, before I got sidetracked, the 7/16 hole is a little bit bigger than the 510 connector, which is 10 millimeters, and I don't know what the conversion of that is. But I found having the adjustment room is very helpful. So I'm going to knock this in here real quick. And I always keep a brush up here, just because I always fear marring up the surface of these boxes with the aluminum chips. And that should do that. Alright, crank that down. I don't know if the camera's getting a lot of glare. Okay. So I'm going to punch these other holes. Remember, if you're using a separate button, don't punch this hole for the fire button that's on board. So take a Sharpie and, I don't know, scratch it out or something. Just to remind yourself, because you really don't want an extra ugly hole in your box mod. Now these 3 holes that I'm doing right now are probably the most important to get as accurate as you can, because they are what line up with the holes on the board. And the ones for the USB and the screen aren't critical because there's some wiggle room there. Alright, that should do the trick. The screen is probably the least critical to get right. I tried to size it just about right for what it needs to be, but if you go a little over, you can just kind of clean it up and it'll still look good. So keep that in mind. First off, I'm going to do the button last, actually. Let's start off with these really small holes. This is going to be the 5/64 bit. I'm sure this is really interesting watching the back of the drill right now, but so those should be good. Looks like we got them dead on the circles there. Now next up is the 13/64 bit. Something else to note, I guess, would be the drilling diagrams. I do offer the raw scalable vector graphic file on the site. So you can go in here and you can download a program that's really good. It's called Inkscape. And you can move this stuff around and realign it how you want. So since I'm using these tactile buttons, I could have changed their position because they don't have to line up perfectly with the board. Could have put them in a column along so it was all straight, or you know, whatever. I could put them on the other side of the box if I wanted to. But they're going to end up pretty much exactly where the other buttons are. And it's a pretty tight fit, but it should work. Otherwise I'll probably end up clipping them off the board. So that's that. Now we'll do the pilot holes for the screen and the USB connector. Using an eighth inch bit for this again. Just keep in mind, pretty much any small bit would do. One of the main reasons I use eighth inch bit is because that is, I think, the smallest I can get for this needle file. So when we start grinding out this area for the USB charger, I want it to at least be able to fit in there to handle that. So that is the bulk of it. Now we have to do the Dremel. So before I used this kind of saw blade bit, and I found I was messing up way too many boxes, especially when I was tired. So I've probably gone to the correct tool for the job, which is these cutting discs. Originally I was put off by them because they're disposable, but in the end an entire thing of these cutting discs is actually much cheaper than those saw blade bits. So I was kind of being dumb with that. And I found I was going through about one of those a month because they do dull. So I'm just going to change out this disc here, which I should have done before I started the video, but just another excuse to hear me talk about stuff, I guess. The other thing I like about these cutting discs is you can get a lot closer to the line, and that lessens the amount of filing that you have to do, which is kind of cool. One of the things I hate most is filing, especially with like the Raptor kits and the voltmeter. It's probably my least favorite thing to do in box modding. Alright, so with the cutting disc here, we're going to cut these vertical lines, and then I'm just going to knock out the center with a punch. So I'll do that real quick. Clean this up a little. make short work of that. If you don't have a Dremel, I guess you could do a series of small drill holes and then a lot of filing. That was basically what it would come down to. But as you can see, that made that pretty easy. And there we go. Now we just gotta clean up the edges here. And for that, I'm just using this square file. This is a wood file, but you can get like 5 of these at the hardware store in the bargain bin for like $6 or something. Alright. Now, if you glue this down well enough, it should stick while you're filing it. And then you just have to file the paper away. Paper and the tape, that is. So I did try to cut it all the way to the line here, so just mostly I found that in here. And split this up. If you want to get fancy, you could do rounded corners or really any way you like to. Alright. And let's see here. For the sides, I'm just gonna even this out a little bit. Alright. Still a little ugly. I'll clean up these. I think that'll do. Can always come back later and clean it up a little bit more. For the USB, this I just have to file it across and connect these 2 holes together. So you might be wondering why I'm even bothering with the USB port. And that is because after we hook up the balance charger correctly and reconfigure the board, we'll actually be able to charge both 18650 batteries from this. Which, I have to hand it to Evolve. It's a pretty nice feature to be able to have. Right. Save that. Just making this a little bit bigger. Grab the board here in a second and do a test fit on it. Always make sure to ground yourself on something before handling these boards. And just make sure it fits in there. A little tight. There we go. That's a good fit. Alright, that is the front face except for the button. And let's see here. Pretty certain the button, I don't know if I had to guess, it's probably going to be that 11/16 hole. Maybe the 5/8. Probably the 5/8, if I remember right. I don't know. I haven't drilled many of these. Yeah, it helps if you have it plugged in. I always got to double check these. Alright, I think I'm at 1/2 inch. And I'm at 9/16, which is not big enough. I believe that will be big enough. Yep, there we go. Alright, the only thing left to do for drilling is to do the magnet holes in the lid. So I am going to pause the video here, go wash off all the glue, and come back. Alright, so all drilled out, fairly square, as much as I can tell. And I'm pretty certain that button fits, which is going to have a nice look to it in the end. There we go. That's going to look pretty good. And get those tack buttons in there. Alright. Next up, we'll do the screw or the magnet holes real quick. So I'm going to move the camera here. Alright, now before anyone feels the need to comment about my drill press, this thing is a piece of crap. And it doesn't handle going through aluminum that well, so yeah. Alright, so that is exactly what you don't want to do. It's not the end of the world, but unfortunately the magnets are going to pretty much go all the way through now. So I'll have to be real clever when I glue that in. I try to drill it so it almost goes all the way through, but so there is a lip left that will retain the magnet and hold it level. So that is totally my bad. Alright. So other than that minor mess up, you want your magnets to end up flush. Just like that, and then there's a little bit of a lip to hold them in. So that is all of the drilling. Alright, let's get started putting this together. One of the first things I'm going to do, just to make this a little bit easier to hold with El Squiddo here, is I'm going to put the brass standoffs on. And we'll note that the little tiny screws that I have are not a loose fit in the holes on the board. I'm just trying to find a screwdriver here. They do take a little bit of persuasion to get in the holes. This was kind of a trade-off between smaller screws that wouldn't be as big and not provide as good a mounting options, and something that would fit in the brass standoffs. So basically the reason they don't fit is there's tin solder inside the hole, and all you really have to do is just gently screw the screw in and try to keep it as straight as you can. Otherwise you're going to have trouble lining it up with the brass standoffs and then the mounting holes on the box. But it'll self-tap and you don't have to worry about breaking anything. You don't have to drill these out. So just keep that in mind. You can back it out a little bit and keep going. So do that with all 3 mounting screws. Find them all here. That's the little stainless steel machine screws you can see here. The black ones go on the outside of the box since they are flush mount. And I did skip over countersinking those holes in the prior drilling bit. I'll do that later when we get to final assembly. So just get these screwed on here. Looks good. And that way this will just give us something for the alligator clips here to grab onto instead of grabbing onto the traces on the board and everything. There we go. And then just take the little brass standoffs and thread them on. They should snug up tight. There we go. Alright, so I kind of skipped over soldering stuff before this shot, I guess. Obviously you're going to need a soldering iron. You don't want to go too hot on this. If you have a temp control, I do about 650, 650 degrees. Seems to keep it in proportion. You really want to be careful not to get these solder pads too hot because they will tear off if they do. So using, I don't know, a 40 or 50 like hobby, 40 or 50 watt hobby soldering iron is probably going to be overkill. So just keep that in mind. So the kit comes with wire, and I think we can safely get away with just using about half for each side. Grab the box here to give an idea. So it's going to be from about there to there, and then about there to there. I think half should about do. Certainly not good for it. Let's see here. There we go. And there we go. Let's see here. So strip this off where my wire strippers go. These are my fancy automatics. Should be good. So I'm going to put these the power wires on first, and then we'll do the JST balance charger plug. Alright, so these probably need a little bit more stripped off of them. grab these for that. Want good contact with our connections here. And just to make all of this soldering easier, I'm going to tin up these wires even though they're already kind of tinned. This is soldering flux. You can kind of see me reach off screen here, probably dipping a wire or something in the flux. I'll get this here. And let's see. Good adhesion. And again, if you watch the other video, you can just kind of fast forward through this bit because it's all pretty much the same. The only major difference is going to be how we wire up the battery sled. Go. Rotate that around. All right. So again, to reiterate, I guess I didn't really talk about that. Out is the positive, the red wire, and ground is the negative, obviously. I'll definitely be putting up a wiring diagram for this. It is all consequently pretty easy to do. Go. Get this box out of here before I ding it up. Alright, so that is our power wires, and you can see got good hot solder on that all across the pads. The other thing I want to do here is we're going to work on these holes here because we have separate adjustment buttons and fire button for this mod. So these are labeled F, D, and U, and that corresponds to fire, down, and up. And we're just gonna put some leads in there with this thinner wire and try to figure out roughly how much we're gonna need to get from each one to each one, which kind of leads me to the little tactile switches. So these are meant to go into a circuit board through hole. at least, I think. And not generally just soldering wires to it. So we're going to modify them just a little bit. And I think we're going to do that first. So what I like to do with these is to gently, very gently, bend out the legs that are on the same side. So the way the contact and the switch works, you only need 2 legs to make it fire, and they have to be the ones on the same side. That's what will connect it. So don't clip off the legs before you do this part, just in case you break one off, and then you can always use the other side. So make sure I just kind of flatten them out like this, and then cut off just about, I don't know, I guess half. And then can clamp it and tack some wires to it. So this wire is plenty small enough to get in these holes, so that's kind of ideal. And get this skinny down a little. So tin that up. Actually, I want this facing the other way. So this is kind of small. There we go. So we're just gonna kind of solder onto these legs here. A little too much solder, but that'll be fine. Alright, so now we want to roughly kind of guesstimate how much wire we're going to need here. Not too terribly much. So these buttons are going to end up pretty much like right there. So I'm going to go a little conservative here and say about that much. Gotta remember this thing's zoomed in. Should probably buy a second camera for these color shots. Kind of get a second angle on everything. Can't really say I'm a professional YouTuber though. There we go. Now we want to take some of the really thin heat shrink tubing that'll be in the kit that I somehow lost, and we will put a little bit on here. And grab the heat gun. Trim that down a little bit. Thread it up. I do suggest leave these other legs on until you get pretty close to putting it together, just in case you break one of these off, because if you want to order another one of these switch from like Mouser or whatever, I mean, you're going to pay 5 times the cost of the switch and shipping. Definitely you need both sides of it, and they are kind of a pain to repair if you do break one off. So I'm going to skip recording doing the second one because it's exactly the same. And let's move on to the button. Okay. For the button, all we need to do right now is get some leads soldered on to what is labeled F right here, those 2 little spots. So you don't need to strip too much wire for this. If I could get it to work. So that is easily, yeah, more than enough. So get some flux on there. Maybe give the wire a little twist. And hit it with a good dab of solder. And get the other one. These wires don't need to be too long either. They're really just running right up here to the button, so shouldn't be too much of an issue. There we go. And here's where these angle cutters come in real handy. We can nip off a little bit of excess there. The up-down buttons I'm going to hold off putting on right now because we're going to want to see how the screen situates as far as getting the wires arranged to attach that. That is going pretty good so far. Just kind of bend those off to the side and route them up here. Now to get this in the box, now again, be careful torquing on these wires. I had a few people tell me they ripped the trace pad off, which is not an ideal situation. So we got everything lined up pretty good. You can see the brass standoffs down in those holes there. Pretty well lined up. And our button is going to end up right about there. So we're probably going to have to massage these wires back just a little bit. The only thing I'm really worried about at this point is the angle that the JST connector is going to get put on at. Got to have enough room for our battery sled. So let's get that in here. And then the JST connector will have this sticking out of it. So, I mean, I guess this is just basic box modding tips of trying to plan out how much room all of this stuff is going to take. So if we put this on at kind of an angle, where is that going to end up in relation to the battery sled and the button? That'd probably be another good thing to get in here. Just to get an idea. So button battery sled. Guess throw this on here real quick. I gotta say, this is one of the larger buttons that I have, so it might not have been the best choice for this build, but I think it'll work. In comparison, my standard black button is that small, so I mean, that's kind of a big difference. This would be a lot easier to work with. So let's see here. Get those bent back. And of course the positive wire is getting in the way a little bit. Not too big of a deal. Get that threaded under there. So I think I'm going to have the batteries end, at least the inputs end back here again. I'm not going to use the JST connector, or I'm sorry, the XT60 connector in this one because I don't want to take up the space for it, but if you wanted to, I would say there is plenty of room. You could easily route these wires up here to the top and hide it up here or somewhere in the side here. And that would allow you to swap this out for Lipo if you wanted to, like I mentioned earlier. So we got pretty good coverage on everything. Well, I have this like this. I'm going to go ahead and trim these output wires here. And this is just something that I've gotten to be able to do. I'm guesstimating about how long wire needs to be and stuff. So I'm going to cut it, imagining that it ends right about here in the 510 connector. And that one, I'm going to imagine ends, say right about there. Just kind of mark it. Now, let's see here. For these wires, we want them to go the distance, but still kind of tuck down where they need to be. Just trying to think. So negative, positive, negative, positive. That will give our plug charger, we can imagine to be about like that. And then this one will have to route two of these wires up to, or to there, and then one up to here and one to here. And I'll draw that out in a little diagram and try to put it somewhere on the screen here. So let's see here. Yeah, that'll work. So here, what I usually do with these battery sled wires is just trim them to the top of the sled after I kind of push it all the way down. And that should be more than enough. And this negative one, I'm going to give myself a little bit more slack so I can work it around the JST connector. And that should give a pretty good fit. And we can get on with the other stuff. So I'm going to do the 510 connector real quick. It's pretty easy. These V4 connectors, pretty simple to get together. So it comes with the little 15mm one, but I'm going to be replacing it with this larger 22mm. And I'll put that on later. So we got the core, we got the Delrin insulator, and then we got the negative connector. And I'm going to take all that apart right now. Try not to lose it. Alright, first up, when you're soldering the core here, you definitely want to take this Delrin connector off. Stuff's got pretty high heat tolerance, but I really don't think you want to melt it because it's just a pain to get another one. So I'll mount that here and zoom out just a tad. Alright, for this, what I like to do is bare a little bit more wire than what will entirely fit inside this hole here in the post. And I like to do that because then it leaves a little bit of the wire sticking out that I can feed solder into. First thing we want to do is tin up this wire. Gives it a little bit more bulk. And the next thing I want to do is take a little bit of this flux and smear it around inside that positive post. And what that'll do is, as the flux cooks out, it'll pull the solder into it. So let's get this mounted. And I'm trying to angle this down just a little bit here. And then you got to be real careful here not to solder this spring-loaded post to the rest of the body, otherwise it will no longer be spring-loaded. And to my knowledge, there's not an easy way to get that solder out of there. So right now I'm just kind of boiling out all that flux that I had in there. That should be good. Now let's see if we can get the camera to look at this. Now we have this nice little cone of solder on there, and that's pretty ideal. Okay, next up we want to do the negative ring. I swear, people keep emailing me. Again, this one's pretty easy. There's just a few little tricks to it. Start off, let's strip off a bit of wire. Now, when you do this ring, you don't want the wire like overlapping into the inside of the ring, because the nut on the 510 screws down right there. So you want it to end before that outside circle, and that's more than enough contact. So strip off just a little bit here. That's pretty close. And again, I'm just going to tin it up. And the other trick I found to getting a good solder on here is smear a little bit of flux and make sure it gets in that hole. That seems to be the really good gripping point on these rings. So again, let's clamp this up. always hate trying to get these things positioned. Close enough. And that is our 510 connector. Nice and easy. And that's some good silicone coated wire, insulated wire, so we didn't bite through that. Alright, next up, should probably tackle this JST charger port. Now, something to note, so this connector here, I'm going to have a hell of a time getting it off here now. The side with the notches, alright, let's orient ourselves here. So this is the back of the board, and if you look on the front, you'll see ground 1, 2, 3. Alright, so when you're mounting it from the back, these notches in the JST connector, this little white thing, need to be facing away from the board. So if you drop this in here and get that wire out of the way. So there we go, notches towards the end. If you do it from this side, again, it's going to be notches in, but I don't know why you'd want to do that unless you got some funky case. So for here, I'm going to try to get this just angled a little bit like that, and that will help get it out of the way a little. So I'm going to get this mounted in here. Let's see, where's one of my other arms? So I'm just going to get this just poking through these holes here and kind of angled out, and probably apply a little bit of flux to each one of these. Again, these are a little close together, so when you're soldering them, you want to be careful not to cross the wires. Alright. Come on, camera, focus. Again, just going to get in here, heat up the pad, and feed on a little solder. Really what I'm looking for is to see this kind of suck the solder down into the hole. Make sure it's getting a good bond with the entire lead of that connector. And that should be our JST connector. Next up, I'll go over the battery sled real quick. Okay, next up we gotta do some minor modding on the battery sled itself. One of the downsides of these is they're meant to be mounted to a circuit board, which is why they have these little leads sticking out the bottom here. So what I like to do is pull out the battery contacts. And let's see here. And for these you can just snap off the battery contact, or the little lead, not the contact, that would be bad. So get those. And then occasionally you can have issues with these tearing your battery wraps, which is less than ideal. So what I like to do to combat that is take a pair of these bent nose little needle nose pliers, and I grab just the lip of it here and try to keep it parallel. Now we're aiming for a little bit of flat space that will end up contacting the battery. Actually quite a bit of it. That angled part contacts it too if you look. And then hold it flat on a table and bend it up, and you end up with something a little bit safer for your battery contacts. So we'll do that. And that didn't exactly go as planned, but I think it'll work. Good enough. And another one. Now for these, depending on how you're going to mount the battery sled in the box, you may want to, and you probably really want to actually, remove some of the metal from these contacts down here at the bottom. And I'll show you why in just a second. Yeah, I like to say there is a gravity well down here in my basement. I swear it causes me to drop things sometimes. Yeah, that'll work. Alright, so if we put this back in the battery sled and flatten it out there, you'll see that's really close to the bottom. Now if you just epoxy it in there, and I'll note you want to clip off these little things at the bottom here. If you epoxy it in, that is going to be really close to the box, and you don't want that because it'll short out. So let's get this taken care of. There we go. So that would be kind of bad. You can take and just run these across some sandpaper, use a file. I use a little grinder, which I'm going to grab here in just a second. Now this is my mini grinder. I have no idea why I bought this years ago, but I did. It was one of those impulse purchases at Harbor Freight, which I'm sure a lot of people can understand. But it has been useful, so I don't really regret it. So I'm going to grind these down just a few millimeters to avoid that issue. So while that spins down, I'll show you the difference here. Get one of these back in the sled. Now, to note, I did intentionally leave those little teeth on there, and those do help retain it in the sled. So there we go. That's why we do that, so it doesn't reach the bottom anymore. And get those all back in there. The one other thing I like to do is to cut off these tabs on the sides of the sled that are meant to help retain the batteries. You can do that or not. I find it just makes it less of a pain to get the batteries out. Although with the larger B box, I would note they do have a little bit more room to wiggle. So maybe I will only take off one on each side this time. And I'm just scoring it here. There we go. And that should just snap off now. There we go. And that is the modding for the battery sled. Now we just got to get it wired up. Okay, so we're wiring this in series, so we want to make sure to jump one side of the battery sled, and to do that I'm just going to use a piece of wire here. I have to remember to throw in some extra for this additional part of the kit. So in the past I've had some issue getting wire to stick to these battery contacts, and I've finally come across a technique that I feel works pretty well. And what I like to do is first get some flux onto the contacts here. There we go. And the next thing I like to do is throw a little bit of solder, a little pool onto each one. And I think there's like some protective coating on these or something. And this kind of helps burns it off. So there we go. Next up, for the wire, I like to tin it up just to make sure it adheres better. And then it's just a matter of pretty much drowning it in solder. Probably put way too much on these, but I really don't like the wires popping off, so I figure it's called for. And just get everything hot here. Try to avoid melting the insulation on your wire. And give that thing a second to cool. But while it's still pliable, I'll bend it over here like that. So I get that piece of paper under here. So measuring this, what I've come to find is if you go just about to the end of the sled, you can clip it just like that. And then usually just kind of mark it right there at the contact, and strip off what's left over. So after that, and that seems to be just about right. At least from the, I don't know, dozens or hundreds of times that I've done this now. And now where'd my forceps go? Come on. Let's see here. There we go. So I just put a little crink in it here, and that folds over real nice. Dab a little bit more flux on, or a lot of it, depending on your own opinion, I guess. And just hold that down and warm everything up. And there we go. That is the bridged side of the battery sled, and that's going to be at the top of the box. Next up, we should probably start thinking about getting this XT or JST charger. I always mix up all these connectors and chargers and everything. So here's what's going on here. If we look on the board here and how this plugs in, and I'll do a nice color-coded wiring diagram. So we got gray, which is that one. We got blue, which is the second from the left, and I got this slightly plugged in here with the notches up. For our colorblind people, I know there's probably more than a few. So we got gray, blue, purple, and then white. And those correspond to gray being ground, blue being the positive for battery 1, and purple and white we're going to wire to the positive for battery 2. And that is how we make 2 series work with this board. So let's get that going. That's going to end up somewhere down here. So gray has to go to the negative, which is going to be right here. And it's going to be about like that. This blue one has to go all the way up to the top here and solder on to the end of positive of battery 1. So that's going to be right there. And again, I'll make a nice little diagram to put in the video here. And then purple and white are going to end up down here at the bottom, at the positive for battery 2. So I think it might be easiest to get these soldered on first, and then we'll tack down the little wires on top of everything and get everything measured out. Alright, back from that, let's get this soldered on here. So pretty much the same process. Could be on this side. Kinda try to get that wedged in there somehow. Flux up the contacts. Get a little pool of solder on there. go. Let that cool off for a second. Strip these down and tin them up. I've been using this plate for a couple months now. It's rather grody looking at this point. Alrighty. Get this on here. You do want to have a little bit of bend radius with these wires because they're going to be sitting down at the bottom of the box. So probably not the best idea to solder them exactly at the bottom of the contacts here. Alright, there is that. Now, that should all end up kind of pretty much like that. And we can throw this in here. That is still a little bit warm. So again, these purple and white one is going to go to the end of battery 2, which is going to be right about here. So we can trim that down. I'm just going to leave a little bit of slack. And the blue one here is going to go up and around to the positive for battery 1, and then this gray one, which is going to be ground, is going to go right here. So again, I'm going to give that a little bit of slack to work with and strip these down. These taken care of too. And for these, I'm going to twist them together just to make them a little easier to tack down. These are pretty thin wires. And we'll tin up that other one. Okay. So these, just going to bend a little bit. Throw some of the flex goo on. And tack down with, hopefully without unsoldering the other one. Looks good. And do the negative here. And there we go. Somehow disconnect my alligator clips here. Flip this around and just have to make sure this has got enough room to kind of get in there like that. Because, let's see, what are we going for here? See, that's kind of what I was worried about. Alright, so it's going to end up pretty much right there. Oh, I know what's causing the problem here. Just got to bend these out a little bit. So this might be an example where I made these wires just a little bit too long. But just gently rearrange them here. This probably would be a little bit easier if the button wasn't in there right now. Alright, so we'll just have to make sure these wires get rounded around the button, but otherwise that should work, at least from what I'm seeing. And just have to make sure this is long enough. So to account for some slack, trim it right there. Okay. Get this down here. And tin that up a little. Clamp it up. Alright, maybe I trimmed that a little too short. Surprisingly. Yeah, we'll make it work. Yeah, okay. That didn't quite work. Very kind of awkward position to be doing this in. Try to keep everything in camera here. Alright, that'll help a little. Okay, the last things we have to connect now are the buttons, and that would probably indicate that we need to get, man, I hope that reaches. This is the game you play with making box mods. Alright, so admittedly I could have arranged that a little bit better and cleaner. But I will have to live with it because I don't feel like redoing all that. Alright, so the screen is going to be our next issue here. For those not familiar, the screen attaches with a little ribbon, and the ribbon goes in right here, and to get that you flip up this little tab and then you insert it. So first off, let's just kind of get an idea what that looks like. Clamp this up here and pull out the screen. Alright, so when you install it, this is the front of the screen. You install it so it's down, and then it will fold over and hopefully line up with the slot in the box. So our issue now is figuring out where to position these tack switches and how to route their wires to these little holes right here, which is a pretty valid question. And I think at this point I'm going to clip off these leads. If you're at all unsure of yourself as far as breaking and bending stuff, you should probably wait to do this part, but I think for this one, the screen's going to end up right about here, if I recall. And our buttons are pretty much right over these. So, just going to try to bend these over without breaking them. And the other thing I have to remember is the piece of plexiglass, which I did not include in the earlier section of the video, but will be in the kit. It's probably going to get in the way here. So right now, that would pretty much be getting in the way of the screen. I think with the other one, yeah, this is going to be a little tricky. Alright. One thing to note is there is quite a bit of a channel area down here, so I think that's where I'm going to try to route the wires to. So if only they'd put the holes on the other side, that would be so much better for this. I think what I'm going to have to do here is extend these wires a little bit if I want this to look nice, which I do. So in that effort, I will just solder some onto the board here and make them extra long. and then I can just patch them together elsewhere. Get these situated. And you definitely don't want to bridge them like that. Kind of got this angled so the camera can see it, and I can't see it as well. Alrighty. So yeah, I guess if you want to go with all the additional buttons instead of the shelf pins like I did in the last video, this is something to consider. It does make it more complicated. So keep that in mind and know what you're getting into. Alright, so those are our super long leads. And trim those down. Now the real question is, how do we route all these wires around to where we want them to be hidden? So right now, don't have my other DNA down here right now, but when it all gets set up and the screen is installed, it goes to about where it says fire right here. So that's kind of what we got to keep in mind, getting these wires to where they need to go. And obviously we don't want them pressing that fire button at all, or allowing it to get wedged. So I think probably just go around like this. Now honestly, I guess if I was doing this again, I would probably build it on the other side of the box maybe, because then this would all be reversed and it wouldn't be such an issue. But I the button to be on the side that I have this set up on, because I'm right-handed. That should be obvious. Alright, that's going to cause a bit of a problem there. Okay, I think we'll be able to work with that. I could have definitely used some lighter gauge wire for this. I have some 26 gauge that probably would have made a little bit more sense. But we'll see. That should work out. It's just going to be a pain juggling all these wires. Alright, so Middle is down, so that would be these two, and I believe that'll end up being that button. Yep, down. And these two are up. So we'll do one kind of off at an angle like that, and then we'll do the other one come around this way. Hey, I don't know why I decided to make this build so complicated. This whole video is probably going to end up being like 2.5 hours or something. These cut down, say right there. And strip them all down. There we go. Get this all clamped up here. Make it a little easier. Guess that'll work. Make sure we got the wires that we want. Alright, so that is up and that is down. So, down. End up right about there. Trim that off. There we go. And I'm going to get some heat shrink tubing here so we can seal these up real good. Thread that on. There we go. And tack these together real quick. Dang. That got a little toasty. Yeah. And another one, which we'll do. So how did I say I was going to do this? Try to thread that back there. I cut it too short. God damn it. Alright, so yeah. Teachable moment, I guess. Jesus Christ. Oh. Jeez. You know, I can't believe I did that. That is just terrible. All right, try this again. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I am a professional, right? This is the kind of stuff that you will run into building your own box mod, though. So I guess if I was real big on that movie magic stuff, I could cut this out and make it look like I really know what I'm doing. Alright, there we go. Jeez. Alright, wrap that around again. Going around the bend. Back to here. Say that bends right about there, which about makes sense. So we can do a little overlap. Probably too much, but whatever. Not like I want to look like an idiot again. So there's that. Where's the other one going? To right about there. Get that all set up. Go. Heat shrink tubing. Just double check I got those right. Yep. Do. Okay. Flux up the other wires. Tack them down. All right. And I tangled the wires together too. Oh, that is just beautiful. Okay. All right. At this point, you might be tempted to put batteries in it. I would say don't do that because we haven't reprogrammed it yet. So on with the show, I guess. Just want to get these laid out a little bit. Yeah, I can't believe I did that. Alright, I don't think it's going to matter too terribly much. Work the kink out of that. Pass that one through there. Alright, so that one ends up right about there. And that one will wrap behind it. And that's really only going to matter. One bright side of putting the longer leads on like this is it'll make it a lot easier to actually get it in the box and get these glued down, just to reinforce them a little bit. So there's that. Let's see. Alright, at this point I think what I'm going to do is go program it so we can get some batteries in it and figure that part out. Okay, so this is normally the part where I'd blow a cloud of vapor across the screen, but since I'm actually recording my screen, you're not going to see that. And my desk is way too messy to record for the public viewing and consumption. So as you can see here, I'm on a Mac, and that is a little bit of a problem with the eScribe software because it's Windows only. So if you're a Mac user, you're going to have to jump through some hoops or borrow a friend's computer to configure your DNA 200. So what do I have here? This is VirtualBox. It's for managing virtual machines, and I do have quite a lot of them because I'm a developer in my other life. So there's some tricks to this, and if you're not a Mac user, you can skip over this part. But by default, your Windows virtual machine won't recognize your DNA device. It's like disabled or something. So to get past that, open up Settings and wait for that to come up. And you go to Ports and then USB, and you click on this new arrow or new USB, add USB filter. And right now I don't have the DNA device plugged in, but I'll do that. So now it's plugged in. And then it should pop up in, let's see, no, because it's already in this list here. But you're going to add in a filter for it, and you'll select it out of that list and hit OK. Get out of that and hit OK. Then what you want to do is unplug it again, and then we will start the Windows virtual machine. And I'll fast forward through this bit. So I should note, I really only boot this up when I have to. I really don't like Windows. So let me get this to resize here. There we go. And at this point, we can plug the DNA device back in. And then we can go down here and click on the little USB connector. There we go, and then this is the Dimension Engineering Evolve. So that's all connected. And then what we will do, there it is, the eScribe software. Boot that up. You know, I have like 8 gig of memory allotted to this thing right now, and it's still slow, so. Alright, so this is the eScribe software, and I hope this is big enough for people to see. You can do a lot of stuff in here, and I don't even think I've breached the surface of that yet. But right now, I think it's taking all the settings, the profiles and stuff that I have on the DNA device and loading them up here. So yeah, you can go through and you can set all your profiles and give them names. If you do some pixel editing, you can create custom screens for all of this stuff, and it's actually really impressive how well it is configured. And like here, I added a no-name box mods welcome screen. That's about what I did to mess with this. Really what we want to go to is this mod tab, and there isn't a specific setting for the Li-ion, lithium-ion batteries that we're talking about, but the main things that we want to concern ourselves with is setting this to 2 cell, and we can do the watt-hour calculator. So our total voltage is not 11.1, it's going to be 8.4. So we'll plug that in, and I believe I use Sony VTC4s. I think those are around 2,000 mAh each. And just to note, milliamp hours do not stack like volts do. So 2,000 across 2 batteries is just 2,000. And we'll use that value. And our cutoff, yeah, 3.2 is pretty good. This part is the tricky part. You can set your battery curve, so this is how it discharges over time, and its percentage of battery left. So far I've left it pretty much how it was. You could go and look up the battery curves for whatever specific battery you have and tweak this a little better. So far the only thing I've noticed is it starts getting a lot weaker sooner than I would with another mod that doesn't pay attention to this kind of thing. So I didn't touch that at all. And the rest of this stuff, I actually just left it as it was. You can do battery and analyzer and case analyzer if you want to like fine tune it, but it has to go through and discharge like the entire battery. One other thing I did change here was the Canthal power limit. I set that to 132, and that's about it. At this point, the only thing you have to do is click upload settings, and it will send all of this to the device, and I've already done that, and now there it goes again. So that is pretty much the extent of what you got to do to make it a 2-cell device. And if you do ever decide to swap out and go to a Lipo pack or something, you're going to have to come back in here and change that and load up a different profile for your batteries. There was a couple of battery profiles posted on Evolve's forums. I looked at them. They weren't specifically for the VTC4, so I didn't change too much in that regards. But other than that, that's about it. So we'll get back to putting it together, and now it should be safe to put batteries in it. Alright, so we got it all programmed, and I'll just show you what I did here. So pop one of these batteries in, and then get this nice and centered. Ta-da! Yeah, as it turns out, it's really easy to make those screens. Um, so that was kind of fun. Now we just need to get this in the box and try not to break anything while we do it. So that should be fun. Get these batteries out of here so I don't fry myself. Alright, so at the moment I have the screen held in place by just some painter's tape. I didn't want it flopping around on me. So if I remember right, it's got to get aligned. Something close to that. I'm going to take the button out real quick because I'm probably going to need space to kind of mess around in there. But hopefully this isn't too much of a pain. Come on. Alright, let's see here. So, like I mentioned before, I like to countersink these holes a little bit, and to do that I just use this bit, and I do it by hand, which is basically just spinning it around a couple times in there. These screws are pretty small, so it doesn't take a whole lot of turns to get it to a point where they're relatively small, or they're relatively flush. Jeez, been up too long. So I'll get these turned down here. I suppose you could probably do this with a slightly larger drill bit. Not sure I would though. Just depends on how much you care about everything sticking out. Alright, and just give the camera a little bit of an idea there. So drop one of those screws in there, and you can see it covers it up pretty well, and it's relatively flush. That's good enough for me. You know, your mileage may vary. So these little black screws are unfortunately very, very, very small. And I believe this is a T5. It's a Torx, but it fits in there. So that's what we're going to use to mount it up. Let me get out the... I gotta warn you, this tape is very, very, very tacky. So I think once you put it on, it's not coming off, kind of thing. So you really want to get it right the first time. So I'm going to cut a little bit of this down. And I guess if we really wanted to be careful about this all, we could try putting this in here first. So I'm just going to get these buttons out of the way, hopefully. And just see how it lines up here. I think right now that is too close to the up-down buttons. that get hooked on there? Let's see here. So that's close to where it should be. Say holding it up here. Yeah, that's almost dead on. So flip that up. Have that hang on to that for a second there. Just gonna cut a little bit more off of this. So again, just kind of lining this up by eye. This is one of those finicky moments where you really do want to get this right. So I'm going to line it up like, or something pointy, like somewhere right along here at the edge. That little microcontroller they got on there. See if I can go back just a little bit further. And let's see how that looks. That will probably work. Alright, so then we have the Lexane. Let's try to figure out how this is all going to work out here. So might not be the best idea to route the wire right there, because let's see. Yeah, that'll probably work. Alright, getting these in kind of a semblance of an order. I guess I didn't really expect this build to be this finicky, but I think it's going to turn out pretty good. Okay, so I'm just trying to get these wires lined up and everything. And ready to plug in. So I'm probably going to do is get these test fit in here and get it all assembled, and then come back later and put a little epoxy on the back of these just to make sure the buttons don't pop out or anything like that. Although apparently I drilled that hole a little bit too big, so might have to make do. This one, however, is a very tight fit. Alright, so we got all that. And just to make this all easier, I guess we can come back to that. Okay. Now we can get some screws in place. But for some reason it is not threading. Okay. Do the other ones. Now notice I haven't put the Lexane in yet. Gonna wait till I get these just kind of loose in. And I'm going to get these in, and then I'm going to put the batteries in and see if the screen shows up right, which hopefully it does. Now we don't want the positive here touching the case. That would be bad. Not sure it would be specifically bad, just not good. Alrighty. I think the issue I'm going to run into here is I do not have the button connected yet, which means I can't power it on. But probably reach it. Oh, come on. Here we go. Yeah, that's not perfect. So have to readjust that. The joys of box modding. All of that comes out again. Do you want to be careful pressing on these to get them out? Probably better to pry them a little bit because they can come apart. So I'm just adjusting the screen here. And I'll try to line that up again. Okay, that looks better. So do all of that over again. I'm just going to go ahead and peel this off, which is the screen protector. And try to get this in here again. Gotta say, I'm a little unhappy about that bulk of wire right there. So we shall see how it turns out. Alright, that's 2 screws. That's enough to test it here. Ah, man. Alright, well, I'm going to screw with that later. I really want to get this done. Now let's take the batteries out. Really all we got left to do is screw on the 510 connector, which is pretty trivial, fortunately. And just trying to get this wire arranged here. as to keep it out of the way of the button. And it's just going to be a matter of getting the nut locked up on this thing. There we go. That should make it easier. Finally. Okay, and the Delrin goes on to the positive. Like I was warned in the videos, be careful not to cross thread the Delrin. Pretty soft and kind of easy to do, honestly. So first we're going to get this in there. Maybe it'll be easier to do it that way. Yeah, gotta say, for recording this video today and last night, it's not gone the smoothest. Alright, get that lined up. Alright. See, it's silly things like that that I should have done from the beginning. Alright, get that locked down nice and tight. Close enough. The downside of these powder coated caps that I have made, occasionally you gotta clean them up a little. And the easiest way is probably just sand them down flat. Positive what all that white powder was, but we'll go with it. And that was just, God, I don't think it's not this much, I swear. That is most of the way there. Next up, button. Put the nut on and feed it out. Okay, and where did the button go? Way over here. Alright, button's real simple, fortunately. One of the other buttons, I think it's the black one. I know it's the black one. It has solder contacts on it instead of little screws. So, complicates it just a little bit, but it's not bad. Alright, we'll get that screwed down. can already tell this is going to get in trouble too. Oh man. Alright, so the negative wires could come back here a little, and the positive wire could do well get out of the way. Getting this nut to thread on here is probably a good trick. Not too bad. Everyone always tells me I want to use these giant buttons, so I go buy them, and I think this is a pretty good demonstration of how they can make your build harder. I'm not going to say they're bad idea or anything, it's just to make additional considerations for it. Oh, come on, work with me. Okay. Now, if you can get the button to end with the nut here flat, that'll make it a little bit easier getting the lid on. So I think that's about as good as that's going to get. And we'll just wrap those wires over kind of like that. And the only issue we got here is we got to get the balance charger plug back on. There we go. Annoying little bastard of a plug. Alright, so I think technically that's put together enough that we can actually try it. And I am definitely going to readjust that screen. And I'm just going to guess, but I think, yeah, the button is getting pressed down in there right now. Alright, where is an atomizer? Crank this puppy up. Guessing I don't actually need it to be that high. Okay. Yep, that definitely does it. And of course, I need some juice on there. So I am going to kind of clean up everything. Get that screen protector in there and glue the magnets into the lid. And I will come back and show off the final product. Yeah, I could live with that. It's not too bad. So there we go. Alright, you might recall earlier in the video I drilled out, let's see if the camera can catch that. I drilled all the way through that hole, so I wanted to go over doing the magnets real quick, and how I'm going to mitigate that minor disaster. And it's basically just going to be putting a piece of tape over the magnet to hold it in place while it gets glued in. So choice of epoxies, kind of up to you. Personally, not a huge fan of Gorilla Glue, and I say this in all my videos because I think that stuff is crap. So DevCon, I like that stuff a lot if you're just buying a tube of it. The stuff I use is Bob Smith Industries Quick Cure, and I will say that that is mostly because it comes in these giant bottles and it's cheap. I got sick of buying whatever it is, like $9 tube of, or $7 tube of epoxy that barely lasted me. So I gave this stuff a shot and it works marvelously in my opinion. So if you're doing a lot of box mods, not a bad choice. If you're only doing one, yeah, just whatever cheap tube of epoxy you want to get, really. So I think I got about a dime's worth of each epoxy part here. And I have the magnets laid out on the board here. You can see them lined up right there. And that is because I use a screwdriver to pick them up and drop them into place. And then one of these wood skewer mixing sticks or whatever they are, craft sticks, to push the screwdriver off. And that is the best way I found to get the magnet placed in the hole without gooping the epoxy everywhere. So interesting things to note about this epoxy and other epoxies. If you do get it somewhere that you don't want it to be, don't try to wipe it off. You're just going to end up pushing it into whatever texture. You are much better waiting until it hardens completely, and then try to get like an X-Acto blade underneath it, and at that point you can just kind of break the surface tension and it'll pop off. Otherwise I use my fingernail quite a bit if I get any run over or whatever. But yeah, don't wipe it off because you'll just end up smearing it everywhere. So for these, I set up the lid on a plate so I can turn it like this, and that minimizes dragging epoxy over the entire lid. So I'm going to start at this corner and I'll do the drilled out one last. Really don't need a whole hell of a lot of epoxy to do this. Generally just a little wisp on the end, and that's actually probably too much right there. But just stir it around in the hole, and you want to be careful not to get it above that lip, because we're going to push the magnet down and it should go out the bottom for the most part, but you don't want it bubbling up over the sides. Now if you look on the magnet supplier websites, they suggest scuffing the magnets up with a little bit of sandpaper. These epoxy ones I'm using, the black ones are covered in some sort of epoxy when they're manufactured, so I don't worry about it too much. The nickel ones are a bit slicker, and that might be something to consider. Alright, so I got those three. Just use a flathead screwdriver and pick up more than one magnet at once is not good. And just drop it down in, and then use the stick to push it off and make sure it's level. And they go in easy as that. Get another one here. Make sure it's level. And also, I have a bunch of nails in my workbench. You want to be careful not to center, when you're working with it, center this over any of those nails, because it will end up slanting your magnets if they get attracted to them, which is not good. So this last one here, I'm just going to try to make sure that it gets around the edge. This is starting to harden up a little, which isn't the worst thing. And then I'm going to pick up the magnet with some tape. and gently place that in there and let it sit. While that's drying, let's go over what I did to the box off camera. It got to the point where I think I was having a bad day the other day when I was putting this together, because it didn't turn out that great, in my opinion, so I apologize for that. I'm supposed to know what I'm doing or something like that. Let's see here. I epoxied in these buttons. Also to note, I had to clip these, the onboard buttons off. If you do that, you do void your warranty, so be pretty damn sure if you're going to do that. Because what happened is, after I glued these buttons in, there's epoxy on the back, and it was just enough to press the button when it got screwed down again, when the board got screwed down again. So there's that. I had to rearrange these wires because, like I said, this button is just way too big. So the wires were kind of bumping into stuff, and I just I brought them to the other side of these, the positive and negative, and just kind of tucked them down in there, so that's no big deal. The other thing I did was I extended that wire I cut too short, so don't do that, basically. And I think that is about it. I put the grub screws in already, and I inserted the Lexane window in between the box and the screen, and I'm pretty sure I got the screen centered up right too. So actually, I can check that real quick. So I haven't actually looked at this yet, so, and that is terrible. So I'm gonna have to redo that again. Wow. Yeah, so there's that. I'll come back with the finished product with the lid on and everything, and hopefully make it all look right. So, alright, so in the last clip I mentioned I cut off these buttons from the board, and turns out that has a side effect. Let's see if I can get something pointy here. Alright, try to hold this in camera and talk at the same time. So this is the down button where it was soldered on, and these 4 rectangles here are the contacts where it was soldered. Turns out the down button doesn't work because the actual onboard button is part of the circuit, and these 2 pads need to be connected together. I don't know if that is a brilliant or terrible design, since I'm not an electrical engineer, but it seems Evolve's designers used the switch, since those are the same pin on the switch essentially, to bridge over these traces on the board. So now I need to take a very small piece of wire and jumper that, which is probably why this voids the warranty when you cut those buttons off. So I'm going to try to do this while it's kind of half hanging out of the box here. And yeah, this box has been fun to do. This has just been great, really. So I gotta get a little piece of wire here and jump that. Okay. I can't believe this, honestly. But yeah, that's I think this is really the epitome of the box modding game, I guess. And well, these are great boards. I guess it shouldn't surprise me too much that this happened. So, very, very tiny piece of wire here. I think this is 26 gauge. So hopefully it will be easy enough to solder. And I think I'm going to put a U in it, or a V, or some sort of shape. And we'll get that tacked down, and one of these days I'm going to get this box together. Alrighty. So I really don't want this shorting out something else. Be real careful here. So I guess the moral of this story is be careful. Be careful applying your epoxy, and yeah, that's about it. Otherwise, there is just enough room to put those tack switches in at the same location. Additionally, it might be easier to choose a different spot for them. And amazingly, I got that soldered right before it fell. So, oh man. Alright, I'm going to throw the batteries in and hopefully none of the blue smoke comes out. Alright, so there's that. Down and up. Alright, so yay. Alright, so this is the wrap-up shot. This is the full box mod. I'm rocking a Sapor on here. Anybody's familiar with that? I really like it because it doesn't leak. I finally got the screen aligned correctly, and all of the guts are in it and arranged to the point that I'm happy with. This whole camera shot is taken a couple of weeks after I filmed the rest of the video, so I've had time to use this. Been pretty happy with it. It does go through batteries quickly, but I think you would expect that with you know, just having two 18650s in it. It does hit really nicely. Been really happy with that. Overall, I think it's kind of a toss-up. I would say I probably get about as much battery life from these two 18650s as I do the 900 milliamp hour battery that I have in the other DNA box that I have. Obviously throw some nice clouds out of it, and I gotta say the software the DNA has, I hadn't played with it too much before with the last box, but it's a really nice accompaniment to the whole thing. So that is the Dual-18650 DNA 200 box mod. There we go. So if you're interested in this kit, visit us at nonameboxmods.com. We'll have the option for 18650s, or you can just hook up a Lipo, and it just comes down to how much battery life do you want and how big of a box.